It's been 2 weeks since I had an Arizona iced tea. I've been cutting sugar out of my diet, so this video might not be as crazy as my other worm videos, alright? No promises though. What a coincidence that we see a partial return to Io at the same time that we hear about this new voice invading the deep. Like, what a coincidence, right? Pervading through every step in the Dreadnought. I'm just gonna go out and say who I think it is, because this links to a video I made last year about the Great Quiet Thing and the Not Worm, and I really think this just might be Zol. You know, I think he might have evolved in some form, right? This is definitely some kind of return to that character, because I think it's actually a good possibility and a really great twist. One of the weakest of the worm gods, that's what Zol is. Well, he is the weakest of the worm gods, who at the end of his life called out to the Anthem Anathemy to change and become something new. Maybe even go deeper into the worm's evolution. The worm gods came from the proto-worms like Asa. So maybe Zol is going deeper, past what the worms have ever been. You know, ascending past previously known limitations. But I understand that this might be reaching for many reasons. Like I mentioned, last year I made a video about the Great Quiet Thing and how it's referenced as a not worm. The suffix not being the most interesting part of what makes that reference, because it's key information. The writers wouldn't call it a not worm if they didn't want us to think about it. If they didn't want us to think about the worm gods in some capacity. So why invoke that imagery during an episode in which we dive into a Vex archive? I mean, there's a lot of things to consider here, right? As the deeper we go into Nessus during episode Echoes, we begin to see more Taken, right? So maybe this is that new power starting to stir. We saw Taken during episode Revenant, right? With the mirror dimension and all that. And, you know, there was talk about planar travel, right? It was sort of like bleeding into like this idea of the Ascendant Realm having more layers to it than we realize. Something that now recording this video, I'm realizing, hey, wait a minute, maybe this was like this creature's work in phases, you know, suddenly influencing and pushing in places where it might be able to gain more footing, more power. Like I mentioned, deeper in Expedition, we see more Taken in episode Echoes, right? We see more Taken in Echoes, and the deeper we go into Nessus, and it eventually leads us to the exotic mission Encore. And in Encore, there's that room, right? That room with the Vex portal that seemingly leads us back to Whisper of the Worm. You know, an exotic mission that came back just a few months prior to Final Shape, right? Which is, it's canon that we explore those missions yet again. What a coincidence that that portal leads us to Io once again. And where are we this season? We're back on Io. I mean, a chunk of Io, somewhere in the Ascendant Realm. But it is interesting, because the last we heard of Zol was way back then, you know, back when Io was in our system. And it's interesting, you know, so forgive me if I'm reaching, but all the connections are there. You know, it's not laid out in front of us. I mean, it is laid out in front of us, but it's not made obvious. You know, it's not obvious. It's something that you gotta dissect and you gotta pay attention to. Like I said, the connections are there. But here's an idea, right? Every time the Hive Gods gain some new level of power, their names change, right? They become something new. Zero became Zevo Arath. Sathona became Savathun. Aurash became Aurix. And Aurix became Oryx. Why do I bring this up? Because in one of this season's lore tabs, lore books, Asa calls out to her siblings, the corrupted worms, and dead proto worms and stuff. She laments Akka's death. She feels bad for the ones that are dead, all the other ones that are dead too. And she talks about Zol too. She mentions Zol, but none of them answered when she reached out. None of her siblings picked up the phone and said, "Hey, how's it going, sis? It's been a while." If we look at like the Hive's history, right? They don't refer to their previous forms as themselves. They basically talk about it like it's a different person. I mean, there is that one time where Oryx is like, "Oh, you made a version of me as I was," when he was talking to Quoria, right? But that's different. But yeah, none of them answered, and Zol wouldn't answer either. What if, much like the Hive gods, right? What if Zol took on a new name? Something new. I mean, the last we heard of him was on Io, right? Which was in the Ascended Plane. And, if this new voice in the darkness is coming from the Ascended Plane and reaching out from beyond, then I don't know, it could be that. I don't know. It's interesting, isn't it? So, we've already established this. The common thing among Hive gods is that they evolve and change. So, is this new thing some sort of like evolved creature? A not worm? And it wouldn't be the first time. I mean, we're seeing locations connected through all of the episodes this season. Bits and pieces that are loosely entwined. And it wouldn't be the first time Zol takes control over a sect of Taken. I mean, again, Mars, Io, he's been able to exert his will over them, And it's, honestly, if you take into context his title, this is off script. If you take in context his title, right? Zol, Will of 1,000. 1,000 wills? Come on, it makes sense, right? Like, you can play off that name. Like, maybe he does have a stronger will, but because he was associated with someone like Nacrus, he wasn't allowed to grow in any way. And in Whisper, we see the aspect bosses at the end, right? And there's sort of a similar naming convention when it comes to the Court of Blade Taken. And, as we know, Oryx isn't calling all of those Taken to the Dreadnought. He's not the one commanding all of them. He only feels bits and pieces of control over some of these Taken. So it makes sense that maybe, right, if we consider the naming of these new Taken, the aspects of whatever, because there's a few bosses in Court of Blades that have the title aspect. It makes sense to me. But maybe in being carried by us, Zol in the form of Whisper of the Worm may have somehow, still remained as not corporeal, but maybe somehow took control over a vacant throne or something. Like, somewhere in some pocket of the Ascended Plane, he must have squeezed his way, because how does the worm god that we killed on Mars end up on Io, right? And how? Well, I guess it is one Vex station connected to another, right? But there's still something left there to explore, because we don't exactly know how Zol made it to Io. That doesn't just happen. So maybe he can reach into the VexNet, enter and explore different installations. It's worth considering. There's been so much talk about worms and not worms this year in Destiny that there must be something there. Just stay aware. Stay aware. Remember the whispers. Remember the Anthem Anathemy. Because this is shaking up the entire universe. And this is crazy. This is a good time to be reading some lore books in Destiny. It's, if you want, invest now. Put your stock in now. But yeah, I mean, there's a few people that we've cast into these Sea of Screams before. I mean, I don't want to throw too many names around, but Nacrus is also affiliated with Zol, so maybe there was some necromantic link between the two. I don't know. Even though Nacrus did forsake the sword logic and the worms and the gods and stuff like that. But I don't know. It's maybe if okay, I'm my money's on Zol, right? My money is on Zol. But you know, maybe they're planning on making a story where it's like, look, Papa, it's me, Nokris. I did something. I did something good. Are you proud of me yet? I don't know. But then again, that's an even bigger reach than Zol. My money is just on Zol and the Knotworm being the same thing. And you know, like I don't know, like a Giga Mothra or something. But I'll end it there. And please, if you want to continue exploring what my theories are on worms and paracausality, check out this playlist of videos because I talk about this a lot during the year, and I feel like this was just like what I said before is prelude to this. So please watch it. I don't think you'll regret it. I think there's a lot of merit to those videos, even if they aren't perfect. But anyway, thank you for watching, and I'm gonna go to sleep because my schedule is messed up.